So in 2012, Mr. Treacy joined the Skyline High School community as an art teacher. And then I want to say for the last 7 years at Skyline, he was the Visual and Performing Arts Pathway, aka VAPA director.
Yes.
Then, as of 2022, Mr. Jamie Treacy is a district CTE coach for arts, media, and entertainment pathways. So look, Elin and I go back 11 years with Mr. Treacy. It was an absolute pleasure working with Mr. Treacy. Okay, I need to stop calling him Mr. Treacy, but that's how we called each other, like at the school. So my bad, y'all. Jamie.
Yeah.
So it was an absolute pleasure working with Jamie. He truly cared for the Skyline community. He advocated for his students, his classroom students, his entire pathway student community, and for his art department and the VAPA pathway. But before we get into the first question, I have to share a short story. So during my last 2 years as a Skyline assistant principal, Jamie and I were co-club sponsors for the Gay Straight Alliance Club. So I remember it was LGBTQ plus Awareness Week. So for the entire week, the GSA Club, we hosted an event in Mr. Treacy's classroom during lunchtime. So one of those days was the history of Vogue dancing. So the first 10-15 minutes of the lunch period, Jamie gave us a brief history of voguing, which is a highly stylized form of dance, mainly created by Black and Latino LGBTQ communities. But then it tends to be always associated and credited to Banjana. So after the history lesson, I wasn't really expecting this, but Jamie cleared the desks and turned on music and created a voguing runway. So, and so there we go. Mr. Treacy starts voguing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so dope. And then all of a sudden, I'm called to the I'm called to do my thing. And I didn't want to because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then, the students started cheering me on, and the teachers that were there were like, come on, just go do it. So look, I did my thing.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I was wearing dress pants that were just a little bit too tight that day. I of course pulled a muscle because I did have a pinched nerve back then. So I did pull a muscle. And I also ripped my pants. And and so I was like, oh man, thank goodness I wear long blouses and blazers. So no one saw that part, but yes, that was a lot of fun. And so, we had a lot of good times, Jamie.
Yes, we did.
I really enjoyed being a co-sponsor for that club. Thank you for that experience to support my students in a different capacity. And
yeah,
I had students in there who were my former English students when I taught 9th grade English. And so I just saw a lot of a different side of them. And I think the students also saw a different side of me. And
yes,
we created this intimate community, and the students felt loved and safe there. So yes, thank you for that. But with that said, welcome, Jamie Treacy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
Yes, yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And just to say a tiny little bit about, what it meant to me to work with you at Skyline. You're an awesome ally for the LGBTQ community. I'm an out proud gay male teacher, which I used to be really scared to be a teacher because I was gay, and that, but having administrators like you, it just was so much easier. And I just remember my first few years at Skyline being really, really tough. And, sometimes and I just remember you being such a wonderful, safe space to come and talk to. And I remember one day when I just was the ninth graders were really giving me the blues. And I came to your office and you just were like, well, let's just make a list of the top 10 students that are driving you crazy the most, and they'll just work through it. And then we just like, and you helped me like contact their families. And I just felt like you really made a difference of me sticking with it, because that first year was really, really tough. It kicked my butt in a lot of ways. And because of your, support, I stuck with it. I was like, oh, there it does feel overwhelming, and it does feel like there's a ton of things I can't solve right away, but there's, I've got somebody on my side that's going to support me through it, and it's okay. So yeah, that meant a lot to me.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, with that said, you know, before you tell us what you are currently up to now, please
Yeah.
share your educational journey. And you could go as far back as you want from preschool years if you want, or you could just go straight into post secondary. We just ask that you choose a starting point to where you knew that that is what was the catalyst to get to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I would start with sharing that my parents are both in education, or they both were in education as well. My mom was a special ed teacher in public school, and my dad was a music therapist at a psychiatric hospital. So I kind of always knew that the arts and helping professions were in my future. And they made a lot of sacrifices for me to go to this pretty amazing school, first grade through eighth grade, called Kazoo School in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And it was a private school, and my parents paid for it by like volunteering at all these different events with the school. So I, think back on that, like that was a huge sacrifice that they made. And looking back on that school, it was really project-based learning. And it was an amazing education. It was a small school right near this nature preserve, so I got to be outside a lot. And I want to give a shout out to one of my teachers from that school, Anna Marovich, who taught me to write. I still love to write and provided creative space. I'm still in touch with almost all my teachers, by the way. That's why I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Like I'm in touch with my PE teacher, Karen Anderson. I mean, like all my teachers throughout like the years. Like I'm in touch with all of them through social media, and it was such a great experience there. And it also, Kazoo School taught me to think critically and to know my own worth. Um, my parents, the one kind of bad call that they would agree that they made in my education decisions was they sent me to Catholic school for ninth and 10th grade. And that was kind of a disaster because I was already an independent thinker, and I was already knew my own worth, and I knew how to stand up for myself. And the Catholic school was a really like just hostile environment for me as a young gay boy and in Michigan in the 90s. And it was really, really bad. But I stood up for myself, and I stood up for other people that I felt were being really treated wrong, and just like struggle. And I was asked to not come back to that school, but I didn't want to go back anyway. So then I transferred to the big public school, and I joined a program that's very much like what we have now in California with career tech ed. And it was called Education for Employment. So that was like a kind of a small school within the bigger high school in Kalamazoo. And I had a phenomenal arts teacher and graphic design teacher named Candace Brown, and starting in 11th grade, and I stuck with her for 12th grade too. And she showed me that I could have a career in the arts and that I could be an artist. And and I remember just seeing like, that kind of program. It was like her classroom was like, had the computer lab, and she had her own copy machine. I'm like, oh wow, there's something about this program that's like extra funded, and it's like really great, and it helps you get jobs. And so she was the one who encouraged me to go to get my bachelor's of fine arts at University of Michigan. And then I wanted to commit my life to being a visual artist. And so even before I became an educator, I knew that education was something that like was in my future, but I was like, I'm going to be a fine artist. I'm going to be a practicing artist. So I got like my foundations really down of like what it means to be like a disciplined artist who goes into the studio and manages their own projects and kind of looks for opportunities. And then I moved out to California in 2004, and I went to decide to go to grad school at California College of the Arts. And at that point, I was already getting into teaching. I was working at Berkeley High School as a teaching artist. Shout out to my mentor there, Lucinda Daly. I was worked in her photo classroom. I've had so many phenomenal teachers that are my mentors. That's why I always try to shout them out. Like I just still stand on, their shoulders in so many ways. And and so those 2 years while I was in grad school, I got a taste of teaching high school. And I always kind of thought like, oh, the only way to really be a practicing artist and teach is if you teach college. And so I always felt like I was, working towards teaching at college, but just kind of had to settle for high school. But I realized, like, thinking back on my own pretty traumatic experience in high school, and just what and how much like the arts really saved me, and how much having allies saved me, um and that arts for me it was like a survival tool in high school. um that high school is a pretty magical age, and I just really love, it's like so powerful to me to not only see the kids in like the GSA, but just kids in Oakland just living their truths and being able to have their gender expression the way however they want, and their cultural expression, and their loving who they want to love, and just seeing like, we have a long ways to go and accepting students and all that they bring to us, but it's we've come a long way, and I really love being around high school students for that, and that the arts, I'll talk more about that later, but just like the arts is just like a real safe space for you to show up as your full self. And that's really, why I love teaching high school and being in that space. And so I started my high school teaching career in a charter school, Unity High School, for 6 years. And I was the only art teacher, and that was like the kids were amazing, but I was a little bit lonely. Like I wanted to have an art program, but I was the only art teacher. So when the opportunity came to teach at Skyline in 2012, I was so excited because I just saw like so much potential. And that was when I first started to like have this curiosity about, pathways and career tech ed. And I remember I have this really vivid memory of Dr. Akatuba at Skyline throwing out like all these cardboard boxes from all these brand new computers she got, and I trash picked all her boxes to use as art supplies. And at the time I just kind of chuckled like, oh, it's so typical, like the science pathway gets new computers and we get new cardboard and for the arts. But then I was like, wait, I need to stop having this scarcity mindset about the arts. What do I need to do to create an art pathway? Because there's so many talented art kids, and actually in the Bay Area there's so many art career opportunities. So while at Skyline, I'm like really really proud to have been part of like the measure and design and like the pathway envisioning for the visual and performing arts pathway. And me and a drama teacher who's still at Skyline, Awele Makiba, we like had this vision of creating this visual and performing arts pathway that gave students the opportunity to have interdisciplinary arts experiences and really move between mediums, in the way that you really do as a professional artist, and not just have one form of artistic expression. And yeah, just so proud of what we created with the visual and performing arts. And it was like literally game changing to get that influx of funding from becoming a linked learning pathway. It's just, you went from having like a budget of like $200 for the whole school year to having like 20,000 or something like that. So it just like what we were able to open up was really exciting. And that brings us to now.
Can I
you know,
ask a
and
question?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So, for our listeners out there, could you just tell us about the pathway? Um,
yeah,
just like a brief description and just like maybe even start with like what exactly is a pathway and like
yeah.
how does that benefit the students? And then specifically about the pathway you practically started at Skyline.
Yeah, yeah. So a pathway is a way for there to be like a smaller school within a bigger high school like Skyline. If like 1,800 students, there's like maybe a smaller pathway of like 300 or 400 students. And it's a cohorted small learning community. So when students opt into it in 10th grade, they'll have like the same English class together, same social studies, same art class, and so they have that small community, and then they also would have like a guidance counselor connected to their pathway. So it's this like opportunity to be seen for something that you are personally interested in as a student. So like I'm interested in the arts, I'm going to be part of the art pathway, and then also just like have more comprehensive supports around you on your journey through high school. So what I love about the pathway model is it gives kids some agency over their high school education, and it gives them a way to like make some choices early on about what they want to dive deeper into, and not just have like a one size fits all high school experience. And what it offers on a practical level is just access to resources that elective art teachers just never unfortunately have. And I know we're going to talk a lot about equity today, and that's like a real problem still that we have in our schools, is that some teachers get a lot, some teachers get a little, and it filters down to the kids. And now in my new role where I'm in a lot of classrooms, it's just like heartbreaking to see like the teachers that have the grant money and versus the teachers that are spending out of their own pocket to like get experiences for their students. So it's a really cool model, but it unfortunately does cause funding inequities in schools, because like the pathway classes, we know they get the cool field trips and they get the cool equipment and the cool speakers, and then you have like oftentimes newer teachers teaching electives that aren't supported by the pathway funding. And so it's not a perfect system, but it's also there's a lot of creative things you can do to like support those teachers that aren't like part of the cohort group, which we were able to do at Skyline. And I just became really fascinated in working with the pathway. I became really fascinated with like the program that students travel through. So there's like an introductory course, a concentrator course, and a capstone course. And for listeners that might not work in high schools, a capstone is like that senior project that you work towards. That's going to be something that combines research and civic action, and like a project that you do through the lens of your pathways theme. So I just really was, of course, involved in designing our own pathway at Skyline, and what was our program going to be. And okay, students are going to take intro to visual commercial art, or they're going to take intro to drama. Okay, then they could do illustration, or they could do professional drama. And this, so like, giving them these choices, and then like, okay, what would they do in English, and how does that connect? And so I started also working with CSU East Bay and Mills College and San Francisco State. And for 10 years at Skyline, I had at least one student teacher every year, and sometimes multiple student teachers. So my little classroom 26 at Skyline was its own little like art teacher training institute. And I'm like really happy to share that like 7 of those folks that worked with me as a student teacher are OUSD arts teachers now, and 2 of them like are CTE art teachers at Skyline. So it's like I just got really fascinated by the art of becoming a teacher, as well as like the art of teaching art to kids. And so it just was like a natural next step for me to go into this realm of like instructional coaching.
No, thank you for Just thank you for all that contextual information because
Yeah.
yes, not all of our listeners are in the secondary world. And then actually, Aline and I, we coach some school leaders who don't have pathways or academy
Yeah.
at their school site. So
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying all of that. But you know,
Yeah.
I just want to say this, like when we think of school leaders, I feel like we just immediately think of like the admin team, the principal, the assistant principals, vice principal, deans, but there are many types of school leaders and you were definitely you were a school leader at Skyline High School. And like I clearly remember, I think I was an AP at that time
Hmm.
when you were spearheading the whole VAPA pathway creation.
Yeah.
Um, and so I believe it was like you, Miss Hunter, and Miss James. Like you guys were like
Yeah.
the main
Yeah.
ones that were really, really pushing for it, but mainly you. And it's what I really appreciate about you, Jamie, is that like you went to Skyline as an art teacher
Hmm.
and you were curious, you were observant, you noticed things, and instead of just like carrying on and maintaining the status quo, you're like, hell nah, like, okay, like I'm noticing these pathways, they got all these new things, and their kids are going on a field trip, like, and then like you learn from like the admin that we're we're not paying for that. Like they got some
Hmm.
grants, right, from their
Hmm.
pathway. So you're just like, wait a second. Well, if that's the case, I want to start a pathway. And
Yeah.
you totally like led that. And that's something that you should be proud of. That is your legacy. And like even though you're not there, like it's still happening, and it's still
Yeah.
building and getting stronger, and it's just wonderful to see. And it was really fun. I mean, back, I think when you were first starting the pathway, Aline was the one who was mainly in charge of the master schedule.
Yes, I remember that.
So you two at that point were in more in collaboration with each other.
Yes. Yes.
And then yes, so there was that piece. And then my 1 year as the co-principal, um,
Hmm.
I got to, unfortunately, I was just too overwhelmed to be the club advisor that
Hmm.
year, but I did get to talk to you a lot because
Yeah.
I was in charge of the master's schedule during that time. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, shout out to you. Like, look, I really tried to be inclusive and like get different perspectives and meet with all the directors and department chairs and other school leaders to get input. What I really appreciate about you, Jamie, is that yes, you are advocating for your pathway. Yes, we did not see, that didn't mean that we agreed on everything and you got like everything on your wish list. And it's like I try to hear you out. But like you were still so professional and respectful about it. Like y'all could be advocates, but
Hmm.
and like vouch for your pathway and all that, or department. You could be assertive, but you don't have to be mean. So I just had to put that out there because like I just remember there was some people who would just like come inside my office like a bat out of hell, and like they would be shouting at me, and I'm like, okay, well, you shouting at me is not going to intimidate me. Like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. But no, I just really appreciated you. Like it was, I mean, yes, like you knew how to advocate for your team, and like Not like, okay, here's my wish list and this is how it's going to be. Like you explained, like here are my ideas. Here's my department's wish list. Here are the reasons why you should really
Hmm.
consider it. It's like, going back to the vision and mission of
Hmm.
what we are at Skyline. Like this is how it supports that. So it's like,
Yeah.
that I that's what I remember about you. And I really, really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And it was just I felt like really exciting to like have a seat at the table and to have your time, have the time of day to like be able to talk about that stuff. And you do have to. I'm now in conversations at other schools when something's not working and teachers want to change the pathway and the or
Sure.
there's the student interest isn't there and you have to make some changes. And the adults in the room have to trust each other and they have to respect each other. And like that's the part that like, I always try to lead with. It's like the relationships have to be solid. And it is just such vulnerable and difficult and slow work to make like changes in a school, and you're not going to get everything that you think is right. And because there's always context that we're not aware of, especially like when you're in the classroom. Like we think that we can imagine what would be better or what would be different, but we don't have the context. And I see that a lot more now that I'm like, meeting with administrators and seeing different schools. And it just takes so much patience. And that's like one of the things I like try to instill in the teachers I work with is like, you want to be a strong advocate, you want to be able to like hold your administration accountable and all that stuff, but like change is also it takes like a lot of stamina. Like it's slow, but it will happen if you like really stick with it and you just like take your little victories as they come. Because it's not going to be good for the kids if we like totally burn the school down. So like we have to we have to
Yeah.
so we have to work within the timelines that we can. So
Right. We're a team. Like I know
yeah.
that there's like, there's teachers and then there's the admin team, but at
Hmm.
the end of the day, like we are a team. We are
Yeah.
for the community. And so, but so yes, it was a
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
With that said, so you already touched on like what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Like, could you expand on that by telling us how equity and educational justice plays a role in your current position?
Yeah. Well, first I thought I would just describe a little bit about like the different types of coaches that there are in OUSD, because
Sure. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
whenever I explain my role, even to other principals I work with, they don't understand it at first. So, and it took me a while to understand it. So, Oakland Unified has new teacher coaches, as you know well, and instructional coaches, and then they also have pathway coaches. And so, I'm an instructional coach that works at multiple high schools. So I work at 7 different high schools, sometimes even like kind of consult with even more than that. But I'm only focused on the arts, media, entertainment, and fashion, which is like another sector. And then the pathway coaches are site based, and they really look at this and support the system of the pathway that we were describing, where there's like an intro and a concentrator and a capstone, and there's all these cohorts and there's these interdisciplinary collaboration teams. So the pathway coach and the CTE coaches, they work together a lot, but they have a really different role in the schools. So I kind of do drop-in support, and I've set up my schedule where I have like a different day. Like I go to Skyline on Tuesdays now, and I stay most of the day. And I spend a lot of my time in the classroom. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about my job is, rather than it being like forced coaching for like a teacher who's struggling, I the best advice I got from another coach was like just prove myself to be a useful person. And so I'll just show up a lot, show up to places to observe, show up to places to help, to co-teach. Last week I had this beautiful experience helping out at like an arts day that they had at Oakland High, and I taught a mural workshop for the day. But then I also do one-on-one coaching with teachers, particularly new CTE teachers. And then I also like just help support collaboration between teachers and community partners. And I want to get into the equity piece. I realized I needed to kind of check my own assumptions about how one enters into the profession of being a teacher, because I always thought in my head that there's a typical way you do it. You go to college, you get your bachelor's degree, and then you get your single subject credential or your multiple subject. And then if you want to do other things, you do that at the end. But career tech ed offers this entry point into the teaching profession that could potentially look very different. And in my head, I was saying, like, oh, there's all these people that are doing it like a really atypical way, and it's so weird. But I was like, well, why do I think that that's atypical? Because with CTE, it really values your industry experience, and that's why I'm a CTE teacher. I'm a practicing artist, and so folks come into teaching with maybe their college journey finished, or maybe their college journey is not finished. Like, it's possible to become a CTE teacher with only community college, but you have like a wealth of industry knowledge. And maybe you had a
Mhm.
band and you recorded music. So you're going to teach audio recording, and then you're able to get a credential through that. And I just started in just the last few weeks thinking, like, well, why do I think that that's like an atypical way to go? Or maybe even in my mind, I was thinking it was a lesser way to go. But it's just a different way to go. And it's like, that you kind of arrive at your readiness to teach through your years of working in your field, and then you kind of get the classroom management and the pedagogy after. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's actually kind of a cool thing. And as far as like how that relates to equity, is we know we have a long way to go in making our teaching staff reflect the communities we serve. Like, we have a really long way to go. And in the arts, like, for the longest time, you would just see like these art departments of people that look like me, all white teachers. And I will say CTE, because it offers a different multiple entry points for folks that are working, and maybe just had a different education path as far as college goes. It really is doing a lot to make our classrooms, like, just represent the city that we live in, and represent like our students, and represent different races and cultures and experiences. And um and I realized, like, that's part of link learning, and why link learning is so great, and part of CTE is that it's like helping our classrooms become, just get those teachers in the door in a different way, because we both know there's so many hurdles to become a teacher. Like, oh my God, like, not only like do you have to like go to school for more years, but you have to pay for it, and maybe take out student loans, and it shuts a lot of people out of the profession. But like, I'm really proud that like OUSD like pays for teachers to get their CTE credential,
Mhm.
and you can do it while you're working, so you don't have to like be a student teacher and work for a whole year without pay, which is just nuts that we expect teachers to do that when they start out. So that's kind of why I feel like really passionate about like the CTE piece in particular, because it's like it's really opening up the arts and like arts media entertainment, and it's getting teachers in the classroom that we really need, like folks that have been musicians and artists and recording engineers, and just all these like great things that kids need to learn about. And it's someone that just went to get a bachelor's degree and then straight into the classroom, they're not going to necessarily have the right expertise, and it is better to have someone that's worked in the industry.
No, absolutely. And a big part of equity is, particularly in education, is providing those opportunities, choice, exposure
Yes,
to
yes.
our students. And with CTE, or just specifically with VAPA, with visual and performing arts, like that is like what, okay, let me back up. Because when we think of pathways, right, or like a
Mm-hmm.
typical secondary program, right? Well, we think of STEM, we think of computers, we think of, what's another one? I mean, shout out to Green Academy and
Yeah, yeah,
Education Academy, which I was a part of
yeah,
when I was a student at Skyline. So shout out to
yeah,
Education Academy, which is now known as the
yeah.
Educator Pathway. So like that's like the stereotypical piece. But yo, like VAPA, the visual and performing arts, that pathway, it just brings out like the talent and beauty of Oakland. And let's be real, like what I like, look at our culture, like look at our
Mm-hmm.
society. Like, I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
like what brings us happiness is music and art and all that. I mean, it's surrounding us. And I feel like with VAPA, it really puts it on the map, because
Yes.
we all know that, when there's budget cuts, we all know what usually gets cut out first,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Historically, but now like we've got now that we have like these systems in place in these academies and everything, it's like, y'all, we're 25% of the school. You can't cut our budget.
Exactly.
So yeah, when I think about what we have gone through with, sheltering in place and isolation from society, like arts was experiencing art and consuming art was like a survival thing for us as humanity. Like if it wasn't for all these great shows and movies and music, like,
Right.
it's so there's that piece, but like as an artist, like arts as survival, like I think that's like a huge um equity piece too. It's like giving space for your existence on earth is valid, and you're going to make your mark on this earth. And it's like really hard to ignore a community when they have murals and they have performances and they have music, and like when you have that visibility and that sound from the arts, it's your legacy as a culture. And it's like we create, and I always try to impart that upon students, like we would not have culture if it wasn't for art. You are the creators of culture, like you're making cultural artifacts, you're making cultural
100%.
songs. Yeah, so it is not an elective. It is not something that can just be like cut when the budget is tight. It's like it's really fundamental. And it's when I teach drawing, like the talk speaking of like the fundamental aspect of what we do, it's like it's a visual language and music is an auditory language. Like so it's that core to humanity. And when I think about like what I love about what I do and why I'm in arts media entertainment, I do a lot of project-based learning, but it's not just like arts are projects. That's what's great about them. But one of the core tenets of project-based learning is student voice and choice. And you touched a little bit on that. But like the idea that you can like good arts education like offers up like a prompt or an interesting frame to guide and get the students thinking, but then every student in the classroom solves that creative problem in a different way. And that's where the student voice and choice comes in. And like a lot of times outsiders looking in, when they ask me about art education, there's like an assumption that we're just like, oh, we teach like portraits, and then we teach perspective drawing, and then we teach like printmaking, and then we teach collage. And yeah, that is a way to teach, like where you are just kind of leading, like, okay, it's kind of like with writing, it would be like, okay, it's the poetry unit now. But but really it's kind of a simple way to teach art where you just are kind of leading with the media. But instead, what if you kind of lead with the inquiry? And that's where like the connection of arts and research is really interesting as a like an equity tool, is like thinking of, instead of like how to make art, but like, well, why do we make art and what do we want to say with our art? And that
And how could
how,
it impact the community?
yeah, and how can it impact the community? And then all of a sudden, once you have like a really compelling reason of why you're doing what you're doing, then you figure out like, okay, if I'm going to really make this message clear, I need to make a documentary film. So I need to figure out how to, set up my camera. I need to figure out my lighting. I need to figure out who's going to be on my production team, who are going to be the people I interview. And so that kind of stuff, it's like if you do a good job as a teacher of like giving the kids that like inquiry frame, then they like want to learn the tools that in order to answer their guiding question. And so that's like a really interesting part of what I'm seeing teachers do, like, not just like the documentary film unit, but it's like, no, let's think of some questions that we can ask ourselves and our community that can really be best answered through film or through drama, performance, or visual art.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what? I love this conversation because it totally has some instructional practices up in it. Like I like how
Oh.
you define stuff. We got direct instruction
Mm-hmm.
and then the guided and like the whole applied piece and like just
Yeah.
really like breaking it down for us and like letting us see art like from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So and I do want to close it out like this.
Yeah.
Like you're right. Art, I we should I feel like we should stop calling art an elective. I mean,
Mhm.
it's it is essential. It is part of the core curriculum. And one of my last schools where I was an administrator, we were an IB NYP school.
Mhm.
Like a for real one, not like
Yeah.
the Skyline version. Um,
Mhm.
but and when our website, we said these are the core classes. The core classes was your typical ones where it said like math, English, science, social studies, and y'all, it was also part of the core was art and physical education.
That's cool.
The only classes that we listed under elective was like our AVID courses. Oh, and my bad. Core was also the a world language course.
Oh,
So
great.
those, because
Yeah.
that in many, that's also kind of considered an elective, right?
Mhm.
But it's like, no, we had like essential 8 core classes. And the
Yeah.
way that they were presented, because usually when people write out the core classes, they always put like English and math and all that up top. All of that was put in like in alphabetical order because we're just like, there's no order of importance. All of these classes are core, all of these classes are essential. So,
Yeah.
yes. So, with that said, you dropped a lot of gems here. And
Thank you.
I feel like we could go on and on and on.
Yes, I know we could. If you
But
get me started,
it's
yeah.
a Sunday evening, y'all. It's a Sunday
Yes, yes.
evening. So with that said, Jamie, like could you let us know like what do you do for self-care?
Well, swimming. Swimming. I've been a swimmer since I was a kid. I grew up doing swim team and had wanted to go to the Olympics for swimming, but that didn't work out. But now I'm like a master swimmer, and that's like, I'm a pretty high stress, high strung person naturally, and I need that like pretty intense thing, the act of swimming, to kind of like get the stress out. And then also for me, doing my art, I have a really dedicated art practice. Almost every day after work, I'm in my art studio. So that, yeah, those two things are my self-care.
Well, you need to let Alina and I know, like, if you have like an art show.
I do. Yeah, I have a show opening on March 25th in Oakland at Gearbox Gallery. And actually, this painting behind me is one of the pieces that will be featured. So yeah, so I've got some stuff coming up right now in
You said
Oakland.
you said art box. Oh,
Gearbox.
Gearbox.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. You got to post that on your social media.
I will. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how
I
we'll
will.
remember.
Yes, for sure.
Well, thank you. Well, we have one last question, and
Okay.
I feel like you would be able to definitely relate to this or understand where this question came from. So,
Hmm.
we've been asking all of our guests to wrap up this conversation by telling us a song that gets you up the hill. So,
Yes.
literally and figuratively. Um, and, as you know, um, Skyline High School is way up that hill, and we
Yep.
would drive up that thing, to get to get to Skyline. And Skyline has its difficult days. There are
Yes,
days
it
when
does.
you're like, oh God, get me through this day, please. So what is that one song that motivates you, that you're just like, all right, let me hype myself up right quick?
Yes, I was thinking about this because I knew this was coming because I've been listening to some episodes, and I love Mary J. Blige. I
Okay.
think she's such a motivating artist, and I mean, she's got a lot of really sad songs, but for
Yeah.
motivation, I would say Family Affair. I love that song. It came out when I was in college, and I just remember it's not only is it motivating, but it's just like such a great video. Like she probably wears about 10 different wigs throughout the course of like 2 minutes. And so like it's just really fun. And it just like sometimes to get motivated, I just need to kind of laugh and have something that's not too serious.
Right.
Yeah, so I would go to Mary J. Blige for motivation.
Man, I mean, I do love Family Affair, but as soon as you say Mary J. Blige, I just think of like Real Love.
Yes, yes, that's definitely motivation too, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome,
it.
Christina.
We really
Yeah,
appreciate
this is an awesome podcast. I learned so much from it today and this last few days when I've been like checking it out. And yeah, it's like I've been sharing it with people at this conference that I'm at already. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, y'all
the
gotta check this
show.
out.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
yeah. So I'm really honored to have gotten to be here and speak with you today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.